Every autumn, high in the misty limestone mountains of southern China, a farmer walks out at first light carrying a small paintbrush. Not to paint, to pollinate one flower at a time by hand because this plant flatly refuses to do it any other way. The fruit those flowers become is round, green, and about the size of a lemon. Dried, it turns the color of old leather and sounds hollow when you tap it. And it is up to 200 times sweeter than sugar while carrying almost no calories at all. A single small one can sweeten an entire pot of tea. Buddhist monks tended it for centuries, and for most of human history, the rest of the world had no idea it existed. So here's the question that should stop you. How can anything be hundreds of times sweeter than sugar and still have essentially no calories and not raise your blood sugar at all? That combination is supposed to be impossible. And here's the stranger part. This isn't a lab invention or some modern chemistry trick. It's a fruit, a wild mountain vine that predates the sweetener aisle by about 800 years. Almost everything the label on the shelf tells you about it is incomplete, starting with the fact that its sweetness has nothing to do with sugar. Welcome to Root Vault. If you'd rather remember what the world nearly forgot than let it slip away, take a second and subscribe. This is exactly the kind of story that gets buried. This is monk fruit. In Chinese, Luo Han, the arhat fruit. An arhat in Buddhism is a monk who has reached enlightenment, and that is where the name comes from. The Buddhist monks of the Guilin mountains who are credited with first cultivating it, roughly 8 centuries ago, back in the 1200s. Local legend in Guangxi tells it a little differently, of a Yao healer named Luo Han, who discovered the fruit could quiet a cough and cool a fever, and whose name it still carries today. Either way, it belongs to the gourd family, a cousin of the cucumber and the melon, and it grows almost nowhere on Earth except a handful of humid, misty counties in southern China. In 2 of them, Yongfu and Lingui, people live so notably long that the fruit picked up a second nickname entirely, the longevity fruit. But here's the part of the packet on the shelf never explains. The sweetness has nothing to do with sugar. The fresh fruit does contain some ordinary sugars, but that's not what makes it extraordinary. The real magic is a group of compounds called mogrosides, and one in particular named mogroside Phi. These are tritopene glycosides, and your body treats them almost as if they aren't food at all. It doesn't break them down for energy the way it breaks down sugar. They deliver an enormous burst of sweetness to your tongue. The US Food and Drug Administration puts monk fruit extract at roughly 100 to 250 times the sweetness of sugar, and then they mostly pass straight through you. No calories to speak of, no spike in blood glucose. That's the trick your tongue can't detect. Intense sweetness carried by a molecule your metabolism basically ignores. And that molecule is exactly why the outside world eventually went hunting for this fruit. And the way the West even learned its scientific name is stranger than you would think. In the 1930s, the National Geographic Society helped fund an expedition into China to track down the living plant. To this day, the fruit's Latin name, Siraitia grosvenorii, honors Gilbert Hovey Grosvenor, the man who ran National Geographic at the time. An American botanist named Walter Swingle formally described it in 1941, which is why you will still sometimes see it sold as Swingle fruit. So a plant Buddhist monks had been growing since the 1200s only received its official Western scientific identity within living memory. Think about that gap, 800 years of use, and the outside world is barely a lifetime into knowing what it even is. But knowing what it was and being able to grow it turned out to be 2 completely different problems. Because monk fruit is, frankly, a diva. The vines are what botanists call dioecious. The male and female flowers grow on separate plants, so nothing gets pollinated unless a pollinator does the work, and the reliable pollinator turns out to be a human being with a brush. That's the farmer from the opening, moving flower to flower by hand every single season. On top of that, the plant is fussy about nearly everything. It wants humid mountain air, steep shaded slopes somewhere between roughly 200 and 800 meters up, heavy rainfall and no hard frost and no scorching heat. Get any of it wrong and you get no fruit. Here's the irony that should sting a little. Monk fruit was so prized and so difficult that it never even became a staple of mainstream traditional Chinese medicine. The classic herbal texts leaned on plants you could actually get your hands on reliably. And to this day, something like 90% of the entire world supply still comes from just a few counties around Guilin. Not a few countries, a few counties. And yet, for all its fragility, this plant has one quiet trick that lets it come back year after year. Monk fruit is a herbaceous perennial, above ground scent. The leafy vine looks delicate and actually dies back, but underground it grows a thick, spindle-shaped root, almost like a hidden tuber, and that root is the survivor. When the top withers away, the root waits out the cold season and sends a new vine climbing back up when conditions return. In its mountain home, that means it rides out cool, misty winters with big swings between daytime and nighttime temperatures, returning on its own each year instead of being replanted from seed. Now, one honest note, because it matters if you ever try this yourself. This is a subtropical plant, and it is genuinely frost sensitive. Its winter survival is really about going dormant in a climate that rarely hard freezes. Not about shrugging off a deep freeze the way an apple tree would. It endures its winters. It would not endure yours in a cold climate backyard. And that fragility is a big reason almost nobody grows it commercially outside China at all. But dormancy and sweetness were never really the point for the people who first used it, because for centuries monk fruit wasn't a sweetener at all. It was medicine. In southern China, it's been used for more than 300 years the same way. A dried fruit cracked open and simmered into a dark, cooling tea, drunk to soothe a sore throat, calm a cough, and cool what traditional Chinese medicine calls internal heat. It was official enough that China added it to its National Pharmacopoeia in 1977, and in 1987 classified it as one of the first medicine and food substances, things formerly allowed to be both. Modern researchers are now circling back to those same mogrosides, studying them for antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity. But it's worth being clear-eyed here. That is active investigation, not a settled miracle cure, and anyone selling it to you as one deserves your suspicion. Which brings us to the part of the story where the modern world couldn't even agree on what monk fruit is. In the United States, regulators looked at the science and, on January the 15th, 2010, formally raised no objection to monk fruit extract being generally recognized as safe. They were comfortable enough with it that they didn't even set a daily limit, an acceptable daily intake, the way they do for many sweeteners. But cross the Atlantic and the story flips. In the European Union, monk fruit spent years in regulatory limbo, and it was not until 2024 that even a single specific water-based extract was approved as what is called a novel food, while the highly purified mogroside extracts still sit unapproved, waiting on more data. Sit with that contrast for a moment. A fruit that Buddhist monks were brewing into medicine in the 1200s, that more than 1 billion people across Asia have used safely for generations, was officially labelled a novel food in Europe in the 2020s. New. And that single word, new, is the whole misunderstanding at the heart of this story. Because monk fruit was never really lost, and it was never really hidden. No villain buried it. What kept it from the world for 8 centuries was simpler and stranger than any conspiracy. It was just too hard to grow anywhere but one misty corner of one Chinese province, and too fragile to travel. Geography was the vault, And now that we've finally pried it open, now that it sits on supermarket shelves in little paper packets, we've quietly turned a monk's longevity medicine, a hand-painted mountain fruit, into just another line on the back of a diet soda can, filed next to the artificial sweeteners it has almost nothing in common with. We got the treasure out of the vault. We're just not entirely sure we understand what we're holding. So here's how to actually use the thing, because it's on the shelf now and most people use it wrong. First, understand there are two completely different products wearing the same name. One is the whole dried fruit, sold in Asian groceries, brown, light, and hollow sounding. The other is the extract, a powder, usually blended into those little packets. And here's the catch almost nobody points out. A huge share of the monk fruit sweeteners on Western shelves are mostly something else. Turn the package over and you'll often find erythritol, a sugar alcohol, making up the bulk of it with just a whisper of actual monk fruit extract for sweetness. That's not really a scam. Pure monk fruit extract is so intensely sweet, it's almost unusable by the pinch, so it gets diluted into something you can actually spoon. But if you want the real thing, read the label. If you've got the whole dried fruit, the classic use is the simplest one there is. Crack one open, break it up, skin, pulp, seeds and all into a pot with about a litre of water and simmer it for 10 to 30 minutes. You'll get a dark, honey-brown tea that's clean and sweet with a faint cooling, almost licorice-like note behind it. That same brew goes into soups and broths all across southern China. For baking, monk fruit has a genuine edge over some sweeteners. Its mogra sides are heat-stable, so they don't break down in a hot oven. Just respect how strong the pure extract is. A tiny amount does the work of a lot of sugar, which is exactly why the one-to-one baking blends exist. And if that phrase survives winter's outdoors tempted you into growing your own, be honest with yourself about your climate. Unless you can give it humid, frost-free, mountain-like conditions and hand-pollinate every flower yourself, that backyard vine is far more likely to sulk than to fruit. This is a plant that has resisted domestication almost everywhere on Earth. That isn't a challenge, it's a warning. So picture that farmer one more time, out in the mist at dawn, moving down the rows with a paintbrush, touching each flower by hand, performing the same painstaking ritual that has kept this fruit alive for 800 years. Every zero-calorie packet, every diet soda that lists monk fruit on the back, every clean little sweetener in the health food aisle traces straight back to that hillside and that brush. The sweetest fruit on earth still can't sweeten a single thing without a human being willing to do the work one flower at a time. If this is the kind of story you don't want the world to forget, subscribe. The vault is full of them, and the next one is already waiting. Another plant the whole world walked right past, never knowing what it was worth.